Hi there, and welcome to Smash Month, where I'll be talking about all things Smash Bros. For the best part of a month, because there's a new one on the way, and I sometimes talk about relevant things on this show, it happens occasionally. And yes, I am aware that the name Smash Month is one letter removed from Smash Mouth. More aware than you could possibly understand. I do love me some Smash Bros. From time to time. Not all the time though, because I worry that I'll get too attached to the intricacies of the competitive scene and become too obsessed with landing lag and wave dashing and lose a bit of enjoyment for the sillier parts of these games. Mainly the stages, which based on which ones are available for competitive usage, are almost all useless and terrible. I'm here to tell you that most of them are in fact wonderful and should be treasured, except for the ones that aren't. I'm also aware that a lot has been done in recent games to ensure that some of the problems present in a few of these stages don't get in the way of the average player's enjoyment, with the implementation of Omega and Battlefield versions. However, not only was that not an option for any game before Smash 4, but sometimes I like enjoying Smash Bros. Casually with the stages as they were originally made. Those were the dark days before the Omega stages came into play. If this starts to sound like therapy at any point, let me know, and I'll try and stop. It shouldn't take you too long to work out that auto-scrolling stages are the bane of the devil. Even the most optimistic soul who is more than willing to give it a go for the hell of it will be hardened into a grizzled veteran who shudders at the mere mention of a stage that runs away without you. I get stage hazards to a certain degree, but when the stage itself is in a constant state of flux, it becomes very hard to get any kind of grounded footing and be comfortable with your surroundings. Most of them are terrible, but Orbital Gate Assault goes one step beyond by making the stage changes unpredictable and really stupid. This is clearly a world where people saw Corneria and thought, nah, that's boring, let's get fucky with things. Because the relative tranquility of Corneria has been traded out for a very hectic, constantly changing war zone. And I'll spoil things for you, that's not exactly an improvement. Orbital Gate Assault technically isn't an auto-scroller because the stage settles down from time to time, but it achieves the same effect by having spaceships swoop in and out of the action and occasionally becoming solid platforms. The number of times I've died because I haven't been in quite the right position between transitions is stupid, and it's never been a stage I've looked forward to fighting on. I keep falling off these R-wings as well. I'm not sure if that's the stage's fault or if I'm just an idiot. Can't it be both? You can tell which stages throughout Smash Bros. History were made with more than just a base concept in mind. This is something that Nintendo have gotten better at over the years, but for a while they were just kind of making a stage based on a game or an area in a game and not really thinking how it would work as a stage. So it looked great, but it plays like ass. I used to really like Jungle Japes, and I can't for the life of me remember why. Probably because I first experienced it back in Melee and I was a young impressionable kid back then who didn't have the luxury of choosing from over 100 stages. You people have no idea what life was like back then. Jungle Japes would come up and I'd just make do. Never mind that most of the platforms that make up this stage are very small and perilously positioned over a raging river that kills you instantly in Melee and whisks you away pretty quickly in every other game. Jungle Japes would be fine if it was either this cramped or this dangerous, but not both at the same time. In Brawl and Beyond, they added claptraps who swim by every now and then, annihilating any poor souls who make contact with one, which feels like gross overkill and I'd like you to stop. There's also all those CPU glitches in Melee where even level 9 computer players would get into an endless loop of killing themselves on Jungle Japes. Hey, I can take a hint. They know something we don't. Considering its legacy as one of the most important games of all time, I am surprised that Nintendo haven't looked to Super Mario 64 for more inspiration for stage layouts. They made a few levels based on Peach's castle, which were decent, but Super Mario 64 had such huge variety in its level design that I am genuinely a little shocked that the devs never went back to the likes of Tick-Tock Clock or Hazy Maze Cave for ideas. Maybe it's because they previously went to Rainbow Ride, famously everyone's favourite level from that game, and produced something dumb. Mind you, something accurate as well. Maybe it's only fitting that one of the more aggravating levels from Super Mario 64 made its way into Smash Bros. As a lengthy, ponderous, and very annoying stage. We've got another auto-scroller here because, like I said, Bane of the Devil, but Rainbow Cruise is unique because of the directions it takes you in. The opening where you're on the ship is alright, and maybe even has more space on it than the whole of Jungle Japes, but then you leave the ship behind and leap from one materializing platform to the other as donut blocks fall away from beneath you and magic carpets lead you to freedom. The overabundance of ungrabbable ledges makes Rainbow Road a stage that harshly punishes mistakes, and one where you need good mobility and recovery, otherwise you're very screwed. It looks pretty though. I like what you've done with the rainbows. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate may have an unreal number of stages, but I think it's fascinating to see which stages didn't make it in. Most of them have been updated and replaced like the other variants of Battlefield and Final Destination, but you've also got stages like Pokefloats and Planet Zebes that were left on the shelf for whatever reason. Zebes I get because it's been replaced by a ton of other better Metroid stages, but I would have loved to have seen Pokefloats in HD, with the same polygonal Poke models for that sweet injection of nostalgia that we're clearly lacking. On the flip side, you've got Icicle Mountain that's been left on the floor, and I hope to never see it again. I have surprisingly vivid memories of playing Melee as a kid, choosing random for a stage and great anticipation for what might come up, and then slumping back in my chair when Icicle Mountain came up. I didn't hate it back then, but I just wished I was playing on a stage that was more fun. Times have changed since then. Now I fucking hate it. Which is a shame really, because ice climbers haven't got a ton of options for stages, and this is all they had in Melee. You just gotta make do with whatever shitty hand has been dealt for you. Icicle Mountain breaks new ground by being a vertical auto-scroller, which sounds bad and plays pretty bad as well. If horizontal scrollers were dominated by fast characters, a vertical scroller favors characters with good or multiple jumps, which is just as well because you'll be probably spending more time jumping than actually fighting. What makes Icicle Mountain even worse when compared to horizontal scrollers is that Icicle Mountain moves in both directions, at random intervals and also at wildly different speeds. It just feels like the focus is on survival here as opposed to the smashing that has been advertised on the box. Don't be making Smash Bros into a survival game now, we've got enough shitty variants of those as it is. When it comes to enjoying your Smash Bros, size matters a ton. There's an optimal size to a stage, which is roughly the size of Final Destination incidentally, and you tend to notice and feel the effects of fighting on a stage that is either too big or too small. A stage that is too small suffers from there not being enough areas to escape from an opponent if you get pinned down, while a massive stage is just really boring. Like, I have to make an effort to clamber over to the other side to reach this guy who's just sitting here waiting for me, and why is Newport City so large? I know it's a city, that part makes sense, but the practicality of making Newport City one of the biggest stages in Smash Bros. History is let down by the fact that most characters are designed to operate in much smaller spaces with closer blast zones. Expanding things out doesn't take into account slower characters who have to lumber across the stage in order to get anything done, or weaker characters who struggle to score KOs because there's just so much goddamn space for opponents to recover from hits with. It also doesn't help that the best place to duke it out with other fighters is also the most likely area for the ultimate Chimera to spawn and insta-kill you into oblivion. Luckily it looks a bit better in Smash Bros. Ultimate, in part because it's now available in Omega and Battlefield form. Now I can actually see the city in the background and not confuse it for the foreground. The nature of the mother games means that Nintendo has always had a whole load of great ideas for some great stage concepts, and with Magicant and Onett proving to be actually pretty decent stages, it means that Newport City stands out all the more. Maybe they should add a new stage where it's the sunflower fields from Mother 3, and the main hazards are your own tears. I'd love to know how Nintendo and their affiliates work out what concepts would work nicely as stages. Definitely there's been a lot of evidence elsewhere in this video that implies they don't think too hard about how any one idea would work when you've got characters leaping over rotating platforms of doom. But I prefer to give the devs the benefit of the doubt and just say that they had decent intentions if nothing else. Some of the weirder stage designs do remind me of the trophy tussles in Melee, where they plonked you down onto a stage made of the trophy you were trying to win and said, "Do the smashy thing," despite how bad an idea that was. In hindsight, I realized this was just practice for 75 meters in Brawl. What the fuck is this stage? Why is there so much going on? I came here to beat people up and have a good time, and now there's a giant 8-bit ape throwing springs at me, and now I just want to go home. 75 meters is a really weird stage to think about because an overview will tell you how big the stage is, but a lot of that is black space. When you're leaping from one platform to the next, making sure to avoid these fire guys, you notice how surprisingly cramped it is and how the only real place you can have a proper fight is the upper area where Donkey Kong hangs out and chucks those jacks at you. For its size, 75 meters is surprisingly small and way too eventful to get any meaningful fighting done. It's a journey in of itself to move around this stage, and I'd rather not have to worry about that so much. I do like the random KOs I get from fighters getting launched by that jack though. I guess I deserve that? Honestly, I can see why Nintendo felt the need to pay homage to their illustrious history, but I wish they'd find better ways of doing it than making half-baked Smash Bros. Stages. I suppose you can get a decent elevator pitch out of converting classic arcade titles into playable stages in a fighting game, complete with all their disruptive hazards, but it doesn't make them any more fun to play in. Or rather, Mario Bros. Is kind of fun to fight on, but not for the right reasons. Which is where the casual Smash Bros. Fan in me is screaming out because there are dozens of other stages that you'd choose if you were interested in some serious smashing, but very few others can give you as much chaotic bullshit as Mario Bros. Masahiro Sakurai said himself that this is a stage that throws all the basic rules of Smash out of the window, since the platforms are so close together and conventional fighting is very difficult. You can try to string combos together, but you'll have a much easier time throwing one of the enemies at an opponent and sending them flying across the screen because the knockback is insane. What I'm trying to say is that Mario Bros is a fun stage when you're in the mood, but the rest of the time, it's a poorly designed mess that breaks way too many conventions to feel like the same game. But hey, it helped inspire the Power Block item, which sometimes does things. Not bad for a day's work. Most of the time, I'm very excited by the prospect of Smash Bros. Shaking up established convention. This adaptability is what separates it as a franchise from other fighting games, and I was very intrigued around the time of Smash 4 when the powers that be decided that 8-player rounds of Smash Bros. Were something that would be worth pursuing. I guess they were right because they brought it back for Ultimate. I suppose it makes sense if you have a lot of people over and need to keep them entertained, but the issue was that a load of new stages were made extra large in order to fit everyone in. And I hate most of them. 8-player Smash made sense for a handful of existing stages, like New Pork City for example, because suddenly their size was justified and used quite well. But the problem was, in order to justify the need to have this mode in there, a lot of new stages were added to Smash 4, designed with this in mind from the start. And they're pretty fucking huge. Unlike a lot of other large stages, the Great Cave Offensive comes with a ton of bonus features to make fighting on this stage a painful challenge that I wouldn't wish on anyone. It's the biggest stage in Smash Bros. History, and you can feel its size as you negotiate the lengthy expedition at the start of every round before you make contact with an opponent. It kinda works with 8 people since you can break off into smaller groups and not feel too overwhelmed, but with anything less than 4 players, this is just tragic. At times it feels like something fresh from the more basic reaches of the stage builder with all these lava traps and spiked walls. I can see what they were going with here and I appreciate a Kirby stage with some unique aesthetics, but practically speaking, it's pretty shocking. What's wrong with green greens, eh? The differences between the 3DS and Wii U versions of Smash 4 annoy me from time to time. The 3DS version got the better extra modes and a lot of the better stages, but you could play the Wii U version by using multiple different control methods and without wearing away the plastic on the 3DS's analog stick. Suitably, I'd like to stick with the differences in stages because I can't think of too many on the 3DS that actively pissed me off. They had this really fun version of Pac-Man where power pellets would strengthen your character and the ghost provided an unpredictable hazard to be wary of. Sadly, they're not bringing it back for Smash Ultimate. They are bringing back this abomination though. So the Pac-Man everyone knows and loves is this guy, but Smash Bros went for more modern designs so that there would be more options with his moveset. The downside to this decision is that Pac-Man apparently needed a stage that reflected this, at which point Pac-Land was chosen and the world has never been the same since. Apart from being another auto-scroller, Pac-Land is a very busy stage full of problems and obstacles that are guaranteed to trip you up if you're also fending off 1 to 3 opponents at the same time. The sections with the water and the falling logs and this stupid water pit that I always fall for are just too much to handle. Unlike some other people, I'm okay with the design of Pac-Land because it reflects the game it comes from very nicely, but it sometimes makes it hard to see hazards in all this chaos. They just blend in a little too well. Is this where the developers had a bunch of ideas and simply decided to use all of them? Oh, I miss actual Pac-Man. Does anyone here remember Electroplankton? I'd be pleasantly surprised if you do, because we're talking about the formative years of the Nintendo DS, a good 13 years ago, when developers were experimenting with what kind of content they could make for this new handheld. Nintendo hired the guys who would eventually become responsible for those NES remixes to make some weird, trippy music-making game called Electroplankton, where you tap the screen a bunch and make some noises that could potentially be interpreted as music. It's an interesting game if you can pick it up for a decent enough price. They also used one of its levels as a Smash Bros stage for, I'm sure, a great reason. Hananbow is what I think of when I imagine the least amount of fun I could have playing Smash Bros. Just throw in a bunch of gust bellows and you'll break a man's spirit in 7 seconds flat. It's like the perfect antithesis of what competitive Smash Bros is, of all its variable platforms, its ungrabbable ledges, lack of solid ground, and even some water at the bottom that no one can swim in just for good measure. Why can't you swim in this? You can swim in everything else, but not fucking Hananbow. Ultimately, Hananbow feels like the perfect combination of style over substance, because hey, it works really nicely as a celebration of this obscure corner of Nintendo's history, but also I'd rather fight on literally any other stage than this. You're bringing it back for Smash Ultimate, and I can't help but feel like that's a bad idea. Especially since it has an Omega form, but no way of generating music with the tadpoles and leaves. It's gonna be a quiet day in Hananbow world. This has been RabbidLuigi, and there is a dilemma where I find myself stuck between enjoying the bedlam that stages like Hananbow promote in a casual setting, and wanting stages that don't interfere as much with the natural flow of gameplay. The killing blow for Hananbow in my eyes is that there are many stages that straddle this line to much greater effect. I don't want to ban fun from Smash Bros, but I would like to get rid of bullshit.